Hello and welcome back to the Greenhorn Photo Taker. Today, I know I say it all the time, but we do have something different. I'm planning a summer road trip, and I thought I would take you through the process of how to get the most out of your own road trip or even day trip. I am a planner. I've been doing this since 2014, some type of trip every year. So I think I've got it down to a science, and I wanted to share that experience with you. Each year, up until the pandemic anyway, I've enjoyed taking a road trip. Whether it's to New England or a couple of trips out west or even down to the Mid-Atlantic mountains. I've enjoyed the process of exploring national parks or other national park sites or state parks, what have you. Something to do with nature, usually something to do with a bit of hiking, but always in terms of seeing the beautiful countryside of the United States. As part of that planning process, I kind of get into the weeds, and at the risk of boring you to death, I wanted to share that process with you, and maybe you can get some tips along the way for your own trip planning. Planning a road trip is a very personal experience, in my opinion. I think there are probably multiple ways to do it, from knowing what area of the country you want to head out to, and just winging it and finding your hotels on the fly and finding destinations on the fly. Or you can get down to the nitty gritty and plan your day by hour, plan your destinations in advance, plan where you're going to eat your meals in advance, and really try to get the most out of every single day. That can be really constricting though. So I think it's finding that right balance for you that makes most sense. For me, I definitely like to have, I don't want to say strict guidelines, but I want to have an itinerary every single day. I usually want to know where I'm sleeping, especially if I'm with one of my children. But that's not always the case, right? You don't want to be confined if you don't have to. Before we get started, I think there are 3 basic principles to keep in mind when planning a road trip. The first is that no road trip will really ever follow the initial thought process that sparked your interest in the first place. It is absolutely an iterative process from the planning stage until you get in the car, right? Be adaptable, be flexible. It's okay that there's change. In fact, most of the time, change is happening because you need it to. And in the end, you'll enjoy the trip much more for having made that small change or large change along the way. The second is enjoy the process of planning, at least as much as you can. I love diving into Google Maps. I love diving into Instagram or Flickr to find beautiful destinations to explore. It may not be for everyone, but try to enjoy that process if you can. 3, I found out this the hard way. Take notes. Take lots of notes in the planning stage. For me, it might take a month to nail down my itinerary. And something that I found on day 3, in the hills of the Rocky Mountains, I'll never remember that by the time we get to my final planning. So take copious notes. Make sure you, if you see something that might even spark your interest, write it down, jot it down. That way you can always refer to it if you have to. Okay, step 1. Understand what you want to get out of your trip. By that I mean, do you want to do some hiking? Are you a person that really enjoys food, that you'll find yourself disappointed if you're in a small town without a great restaurant for the night? Are there specific must-dos that you want to plan your trip around, right? If you're traveling out west and you want to hit Yosemite Park for the first time, or are there any must-dos that you have to check off your list as you go through your route? The second most important, I'm hesitant to even say it because it's so obvious, but you have to know how long your trip is going to be. Do you have 3 days? Do you have 7 days? Do you have 14 days? You got to set those proper expectations. You can only do so much in a short trip, And in a long trip, you will be exhausted by the end if you don't take some time to take a little bit of break and relax. So understand how long you have. Third, and also very critical, how much driving can you really get through in a day? From my experience, I know the max I want to do in a day is about 450 miles. I can do more, I have done more, but once you get past 450, it really can be an exhausting day, and you're just waiting to get to your final destination. At the same time, I know that I would never want to take a week-long road trip, for instance, and drive 450 miles every day. Right, so kind of think about how long you can possibly spend in the car and how long you want to spend at your destinations. For me, I don't get to travel that often, so I'm always trying to cram as much into a specific day as possible, and I choose to do a little bit less of in-depth exploring at each destination so I can see more destinations in a single day. Fourth, and it's again probably obvious but really important to note, if you are traveling by air, right? Often I would fly into Denver, take some road trip out west, and then maybe fly out of Las Vegas to get back home. If you're doing something like that, you have to understand where airports are and which ones fly back to your home state or town. For instance, I am lucky enough to live in New Jersey. I personally look for international airports as my arrival and departing days. So if I know there's an international airport within, 100 miles, I can jet out there the next day and fly back home. There's nothing worse than planning your entire trip and really realizing on day 7 that you're really too far from an airport to get back home the way you want. Okay, let's take a moment to put this into practice. My daughter and I want to take an 8-day road trip later on this summer, probably late in the summer. And here's how we went about deciding where to go and how our day-by-day itinerary worked out. First and foremost, we did discuss our goals. There were really 3. One, she has never been west of Pennsylvania in the contiguous United States. So I definitely wanted to introduce her to new terrain and just a new, let's call it, coast of the U.S. I think it's important that we do travel and discover the rest of what the United States has to offer. Second, I wanted to return to Death Valley National Park. I was there in 2014, but honestly, we drove through really fast. I did not get to spend as much time there in hindsight as I should have. So I want to rectify that situation by spending a day in Death Valley. 3, she wants to see the Pacific Ocean. So right away you can see how it narrows down where we're going to go, and really it narrows down tremendously what our options are. We're going to fly into Las Vegas, and we want to end up on the Pacific Ocean side, probably San Francisco. Actually, that's where we ended up, San Francisco. So what to do in between Vegas and San Francisco when you have 8 days with the goal of road tripping and really seeing the countryside and various parks. I mentioned earlier, my max driving for a day is 450 to 500 miles. Here with my daughter, I think we'll probably never want to surpass 350 miles, and I think we'll want to keep it to something much shorter on average as well. I find a day-by-day template extremely helpful. So there's a couple of reasons why. One, I really want to maximize my time on a road trip. I don't get to travel that often, and when I do, I really want to see new things that I haven't seen before. And for me, in order to do that, I keep a spreadsheet of the things I want to do, the times I want to get there, the times I want to depart by, etc. It's how I maximize my time, my precious time during the day. It's also how I take notes. As I'm scouring through Google Maps or Google Earth, there's so many different things to look at and view. It's just frankly impossible to remember it all. So I used it as a way to take notes as well. Okay, so let's take a look at the template. It's actually surprisingly simple. Well, maybe not surprisingly, it is actually very simple. just your day, what you want to do, how many miles of driving, the actual duration of the drive time without traffic and without how long you're going to stay at each place, when I want to leave and arrive by, and then things to do while you're each destination point, and then finally other options, meaning that if I'm really ahead of schedule, is there anything else I can do that I don't have to research, spend an hour in the car figuring out what to do next. I can quickly look at my list and say, oh, we could do Red Rock Canyon or Hoover Dam on the way out of here. So that's all you need to do in terms of keeping your day-by-day itinerary. And again, if you're not this type of person, you can keep it much more loose or much more granular as well. So you have to start somewhere. And for us, like I said, it was flying into Las Vegas. So I love Google Maps. I use it all the time. So if I go to Las Vegas, I know that, I checked all my flights by this point. I know that there are so many flights coming in from New Jersey. It really is, whenever I want to get there, I can get there. And with the time zone difference, I can really take advantage of at least a half a day out in Vegas. There is one school of thought that says relax on your first day, and I've definitely done that, especially on a long road trip. I think that makes a lot of sense. But if you're kind of short on time, you just have to get out there and try to get it done. So for me, the first thing you do is you have to hit a grocery store, right? If you're road tripping, you need the essentials in your car from the absolute get-go. Head from your rental car place right to the grocery store, stock up on water, snacks, first aid, what have you, whatever your child needs, whoever you're traveling with, whatever they need, stock up. Even something silly like peanut butter and bread, right? Stick it in the back. You'll always have it if you need it. It can really, really save a day, especially when you're traveling somewhere that's not very populated, just to have some snacks in the car and especially water. So let's say I'm all done with that by 1 p.m. local time. What do we want to do? So I know day 2 is probably going to be Death Valley, because Death Valley is very close to Vegas and also on the way to the Pacific Ocean. So it works out perfectly. So the first thing I do is search national and state parks. And 2 things showed up as really, top of the notch destinations. First was Red Rock Canyon National Park. 4.8 stars, thousands of reviews. These are things you can really be assured of as a positive experience. But I've already been there. So I don't want to retread that area unless I have to. So I kept on looking. And I ended up finding Valley of Fire State Park. Also 4.8 stars. It looks wonderful. Now that you have Valley of Fire State Park, what I'd like to do is just go to Instagram. You can quickly see, right, why it's a popular destination. This picture definitely called to me. This picture absolutely called to me. Yeah, anything with a road in it that looks like it would be fun to drive really made sense. So we added Valley of Fire State Park. So in order to get to Valley of Fire State Park, let's just for now, the center of Las Vegas, it's a 45-minute drive. So that's good to know, right? Let's say we're done at 1 with our grocery shopping. It takes an hour to get to Valley of Fire State Park. We can begin to really see how much time we have there. Now, before I get any further, you have to really determine where you want to sleep the next night. Like I said, I want to go to Death Valley. So what I do, I literally click around these different towns and see what's happening. So Furnace Creek. If I click on Furnace Creek, it's a census-designated place in Inyo County with a population of 136. Do I want to stay in Furnace Creek with a population of 136? No, probably not. I'm thinking I want to have a nice meal, relax. Maybe there's a pool for my daughter at the hotel, so I don't want to stay in Furnace Creek. How about Death Valley Junction? Right away, picture looks interesting. Here's an unincorporated town. Looking at it, I would think Death Valley Junction is also very sparsely populated. So I know that I've stayed in Pahrump before, so it's a little bit easier in this case. But if you do click on Pahrump, population 36,000, that's a large enough town where you'll get the normal amenities of a hotel. So let's, for now, loosely say I'm going to stay in Pahrump. So how far between Pahrump and Las Vegas and Valley of Fire? So I can see it is a 2-hour ride from Valley of Fire State Park, but that's from the entrance we came in. I think what I'm probably going to do is drive through Valley of Fire State Park and probably come out the eastern entrance. So let's choose the eastern entrance side. And now it is a 2-hour and 21-minute ride. So you can really begin to see how much time we might have at Valley of Fire. Starting at 1, get there at 2, maybe spend 2 hours there at, till 4, and then you have a 2.5-hour ride home, back to Pahrump. It's getting in at 6:30. And that's really the max of what I choose to do in terms of arriving at a new destination. The summer is wonderful. It's daytime and bright out until 9 p.m. So I like to get into a town by 6 or 6:30, so I can see what amenities are there, what restaurants, what ice cream shops, or maybe my daughter would want to buy some souvenirs. You can get a much better lay of each town if you arrive in the daytime. At the same time, if we're having an insanely great time at Valley Fire State Park, I know I have the ability to delay an hour or two and still get into Pahrump at a reasonable time, grab a bite to eat, but maybe not explore as much. So that's what we'll end up doing. And then drive to Pahrump in a 3-hour ride. There's something called Sunset View Scenic Overlook along the way that I found. And we could also do Red Rock Canyon or Hoover Dam if we're way ahead of schedule. One thing, how did I find Sunset View Scenic Overlook? Once you have your route mapped in, right? One of the great things of Google Maps is just put in attractions along your route. And then you can search area by area, right? So I know that, hey, Lake Mead, that's popular. Maybe there's something beautiful around Lake Mead. And you can search. There's a trail here, another trail here, and eventually it came up that I found Sunset View Scenic Overlook, a 4.8 star scenic attraction. And frankly, right, it's pretty close to 564, so maybe it's only a half hour out of my way to show my daughter Lake Mead, which is pretty cool, right? It's one of the biggest lakes and most important lakes in the country. It is what feeds so much of the south and where Hoover Dam is, of course. So that's our day one from Vegas to Pahrump via Valley Fire State Park while skimming the, not the shoreline, but the outskirts of Lake Mead, Nevada as well. So day two, right, we know that I want to spend some time in Death Valley. But Death Valley is huge. I don't know how many thousands or hundreds of thousands of acres it is. How do you know what to do in Death Valley or any national park or state park? Now for me, again, I'm driving through, so it's a different search than if you're pausing to hike or pausing to camp or spend a lot of time there. I need some quick hitting, wonderful things to see. So I honestly, the best place to start, the Death Valley National Park website. Let's go to plan your visit, probably maps. Okay, here's a visitor guide. This is perfect. Visitor guides are always the way to go, right? Use other people's expertise. So the Death Valley Summer Visitor Guide sounds like where I should start. If you're only here 1 to 2 hours, these are the 3 famous places or destinations in Death Valley. We can do the same thing. I'm not going to go through it. Search Badwater Basin on Instagram. Search it on Google or wherever, Bing, whatever you use, and look at those pictures and see if it's something you want to do. I searched all of these, and I want to hit every single one of these except the Harmony Borax Works, which I would do if we had time. It might be interesting. It might not. We'll have to see. There has to be a proper way to maximize our time to go about that. So back to Google Maps, and we want to start putting these things in. So Zabriskie Point from Pahrump. What else? We want Artist Drive. We want Badwater Basin. Dante's View, Mesquite Flat Sand Dunes. So right away you can see that Google pops out 3 hours and 37 minutes. So if I'm driving from Pahrump to the last one on the list, which looks like Mesquite Flat Sand Dunes, right, there's a logical way to approach it. Dante's View should be first, followed by these two, down to Badwater Basin, and then back out. So let's do that. We know to get to Mesquite Flat Sand Dunes is 3 hours with all these different stopping points. Let's say we're going to spend a half hour to an hour at each spot. You're looking at a 5, 6, 7, maybe 8 hour day from this point. I'd like to start around 8 a.m. So you do the math and you're already, at 4 p.m. in the afternoon. So where to go to from Mesquite Flat Sand Dunes? Again, you need to start looking at your map and decide what makes the most sense. In the grand scheme of things, from Death Valley, in order to see the national parks of California, I have two options. I can go down to Joshua Tree National Park, or I could head into Sequoia National Park and Kings Canyon. To be fair, I mapped out trying to do both, and it just was not feasible. Way too much driving in this short window. And worse than that, the driving from Death Valley to Joshua Tree, there's not much to see or do. So you're really losing a day of travel time just by getting there. Which is fine on a really long road trip, but I'm trying to really maximize these 7 or 8 days. So I excluded Joshua Tree, and we'll end up at Sequoia National Park next. But where to stay? There is Darwin, which is a population of 43. I don't think there's too many hotels in Darwin. There's Olancha on the way, population of 192. Probably don't want to stay there. There's Ridgecrest, which is a decent sized city if I recall. Population 30,000, just under 30,000. So that is definitely an option. But I wanted to try to push it a bit so I didn't have a long drive the next morning to get to Sequoia National Park. So I looked at Lake Isabella, a small population, but because of the lake, there are hotels along the lake. And that's another thing you can do as well, right? If you just want to see what towns have hotels, you search hotel. And you can see, Ridgecrest has many options to choose from, and so does Lake Isabella. So between looking at each individual city and searching hotels, you can kind of get an idea of where it makes the most sense to stay. One side note, don't automatically exclude a small population town. They really can be fun, as I mentioned. Just for me on this trip, it's something that I think my daughter wouldn't enjoy as much as me. I think she'd want a little taste of civilization once we're outside of Death Valley, for instance. Okay, so I think we'll do one more day, and then we'll call it quits for now. The next, we have to figure out how to get from Lake Isabella to Sequoia National Park. So same thing. Let's start in Lake Isabella. I know I want to go to Sequoia National Park. Right away, really important, right? I look at 178 and 65, and I see the shortest drive. But then I see this wonderful, windy road that, if you turn on terrain, always a good idea too, drives through some of these mountains. So maybe for an extra, 15 minutes, that makes a lot of sense to drive through the mountains more than hitting the valley floor just west of the Sierra Nevadas. So that's what I'm going to choose to do. I want to go through these mountains. It's also, I've traveled on 178 before, so I've seen it. But really the impetus here is let's go through the mountains more than this valley floor drive. So then to get to Sequoia National Park, this was very difficult because the best parts of Sequoia National Park, according to my research, is when you get into the backcountry and really do some extensive hiking. Now, I know I'm not going to do extensive hiking, So it was difficult to really decide what attractions there were. Again, the same thing, go to the National Park website, look at a map, search attractions along the route, go to Instagram, and what we came up with, all right, I'll embarrass myself a little bit. I happened to make a PowerPoint presentation for my daughter to try to entice her. So a lot of this I've already gone through. But here's what I think we can do in Sequoia. Morro Rock, see various groves, and drive the Route 155. Why don't we go through it day by day, what we're going to do. So I've already showed you Death Valley, 327 miles, then to Sequoia, 159 miles, and then to Kings Canyon, which really looks interesting, which has Boyden Cave, one of the great scenic drives in the United States. We'll do that. We'll head to Madera, which, let me just explain that really quick. I mean, there's nothing specific in Madera, California, but it's situated between Kings Canyon and Pinnacles National Park. So here is Kings Canyon. So on the way to Pinnacles, let's stop and stay in Madera. It's a fairly populated town, 61,000, so we'll have amenities that we need, and so on. Next day will be Pinnacles National Park, and we'll stay in San Luis Obispo that night. And then the final day, we'll drive up the Pacific Coast Highway. Really looking forward to returning there. And then, I should say now this is the final day, take a look at the rest of the Pacific Coast Highway, and end up at Point Reyes National Park. So all in all, the road trip, we'll see the lowest point in the U.S. We will see a view of Mount Whitney, although we are not climbing Mount Whitney. The Mojave Desert, the Sierra Nevadas, the Pacific Ocean, 5 national parks. We have at least 10 state parks, or up to 10 state parks on the list. All in all, it's an 1,100-mile road trip. But the only reason I figured this out is with this day-by-day itinerary. Okay, so there you have it. I hope I didn't bore you to death. I'm personally really looking forward to the road trip. It's a jam-packed adventure. Photography second, enjoying time with the family, my daughter really, is the first and foremost. We'll absolutely bring the camera. We'll absolutely have the GoPro. We'll absolutely do my best to create some footage to put on the channel, but definitely looking forward to it. Okay, I think we'll end it here. It's been a long video. I apologize for rambling, but hopefully this helped you just a bit in terms of your own planning. If you have any road trip plans yourself, share them below. I'd love to hear about them. And if you have any good spots that we should see in California on my trip, drop those comments below too. Would be very interested to use your experiences to enhance mine. Thanks for watching. Get out and explore. I'll see you next time.